Vacuum test our tank vent. Okay. Intake side of piston condition. Hard to believe we're almost to that again, isn't it? So we're going to look at that here in just a moment, see what we've got. You can see that piston moving up and down. I'm rolling it with my fingers again over here. You can kind of see just like I was doing earlier. Just rolling that over. I'm not seeing anything in there that looks horrible. There's a little bit of oil buildup on it just from where it was setting. There's some, maybe even some burnt oil. I don't see any scratches like the other side. So we're going to be able to look at that piston a whole lot better when we get it out of there, because we know we've got to take it out of there. If we had gone with a clean test up to this point and found a problem, then we would, you know, this would be more important, I guess is the word I'm going to use for that, or more more of a necessary test. But we're already to the point that we know we're having to take this piston out. So we're not going to fret not being able to see it too good right now, because we're going to be looking at it real good on the bench here in a minute whenever we get that cylinder pulled off of there. So we'll take a minute and put some of these tools away here before we lose them all into some of these parts. Just going to put those right back in the muffler. These and this together. Get some room to work. Excellent. Now, let's take a second and see what our next item on the list is. All right, intake side of piston. I'm going to put a question mark there because I couldn't see it really good, and we're going to look at when cylinder is off. Again, it didn't look gorgeous, but I really didn't see any deep scratching, and that's going to help us determine a little bit more about the, again, cause of death on this machine. Now, the next is our impulse passage. Is it clear? So that's this little guy right here. And again, there's a couple different ways we could test that thing. But the simplest is going to be just to simply run our piston up to the top. Get you up to the top, and that'll let the air go in this and right back out the top. So I'm just going to take our handy dandy little pressure tester here, put it on druck or pressure. I just love that word. That's fine. All right, let's put it right here. Not building any pressure, so we're good. Everything looks good. And again, what's this impulse line do? What that impulse line does is that's what operates our fuel pump in our saw. So you can see it goes into that port right here we talked about earlier. We popped it off. And there's a little diaphragm between this plate and the carburetor housing. And this little up and down motion of the piston creates high and low pressure in the bottom part of that crankcase. And this other end of this line goes right to the underside of the piston. And it just slight little pressure changes makes this little diaphragm move up and down. And we'll look at that again a little bit more, but I want to explain what that little guy's all about. And if that thing is stopped up with something, then we're not going to have any fuel flow. So that'll be a thing that we'll have to make sure that we, you know, you got to check real closely if you're having a fueling problem. That little guy could be stopped up. And I've had problems with, believe it or not, I had a 250, FS 250 trimmer. Matter of fact, let me just show it to you. Okay, we had a FS 250, and this is the filter for it. And this was the filter that came on the machine. And it just, I'm sure the way the cover goes on it is really easy to miss when you put the cover on. And it stabbed an itty bitty hole. You can kind of see it in that pleat right there. And the problem, the symptom we had with this machine was it just wouldn't hardly take fuel. It would idle around and barely spool up. It just wouldn't hardly go. And finally just started seeing what it was. Of course, this was covered in grass, cleaned it off real good and started looking in it and found that hole. And what happened was the air, again, was trying to go through. Well, it was a big enough hole that grass could go through it. Well, grass ended up going through the bore of the carburetor, down into the crankcase, back out the impulse tube, and stuck in the diaphragm so that the diaphragm couldn't go up and down all the way, and it was causing it to be to just get a very partial travel on the diaphragm, the little disc inside, and I'll show you what that looks like. But the little disc couldn't go up and down all the way, and it wouldn't pump enough fuel to run it wide open. So we could have just put a new diaphragm in it, cleaned it up, and put it back together. I saved those pieces, and I have to locate them, but it showed the pieces of grass that had gone through this, all the way through and back out, up the impulse, and was causing that problem. Very freak thing. I'd never seen or heard anything like that happening before. But that's why we check the impulse tube, because weird things can get in that tube. So I always check that thing no matter what. Now, let's look here. What was our next thing we're testing? Our impulse passage. And it was good. Let's go ahead and record that as okay. Pressure test crankcase to specifications and record the results. So now we're going to get this thing set up to do a pressure test on it. Now, places to look for when we're pressure testing this thing are kind of the obvious spots. All right, places to look for whenever we are pressure testing, of course, our seals. This will be our PTO side where our bar and chain would go on. That seal there could be leaking. Could be leaking in between the housings in this gasket. Could also be leaking at the cylinder base gasket right here. This gasket right here where the cylinder bolts down to the crankcase could be leaking, and is also leaking on the fan wheel side where a flywheel goes. Other things that can happen, there was an instance where there was a catastrophic failure inside the engine. Of course, this is all covered with a plastic piece for the handle assembly, and the buffers go in here. And a flywheel came around and pushed a piece of broken connecting rod down and cracked the bottom of this. Of course, it was behind the plastic and it wasn't seen. So whenever we talk about this pressure testing, anytime we build a saw, we always want to pressure test everything, go through the whole Stihl engine check prior to doing it. And then when we're done, we want to start back with that step where we're on 25 in pressure testing crankcase again before we ever try to start it, because I think there was 2 or 3 sets of cylinders and pistons put back on that 660 saw, trying to find out why it'd run a little bit, customer bring it back, all scored up again. Well, it was sucking air somewhere, and when it was there, and that's the problem with, there's the problem, let's change the piston and cylinder. We certified that it was dead, but what we need to do is make sure why it died. And it turned out there was a crack in the housing. And of course, it wouldn't have been a big deal to pop the housing off, put a new half on it. It'd be a whole lot better to do that than to 2 or 3 cylinders and pistons in it, and then still have to put a whole side on the crank housing. So anyway, just some things. Again, I have this broken down on here for you to look at. The impulse tube can also be a spot that we can end up with a issue on air leaking. So we'll that one's clear, but we'll want to make sure that we don't have a leak in that also. Now, what we're looking for, this will show up when we pressure test the crankcase housing. We'll put a stopper right here, and when we pressure test, it'll show up if it's leaking in here. So all of these spots right here are our impulse port, and that's what the end looks like that this is hooked to down in the bottom. And any of this stuff right here that we talked about can be a potential air leak source in the crankcase part of it. Again, we already talked about could have an air leak pre-carburetor in the fuel line. So those are things there that we want to test. Before we, let's see here. Okie doke. Let's go ahead and get this fella stopped up. Okay, so the first thing we're going to be blocking in this test is going to be our exhaust. I'm just going to take care of that real quick so that we can get that part out of the way, and we'll take these torque screws right out of the cylinder. Break that other one loose before we pull that all the way off. And watch your fingers on those bumper spikes on these bigger saws, because they will peel the hide right off of you. Something where you're going to be working around that a lot. I'm not opposed to just taking the couple minutes it takes to just take them off. If it looks like your fingers are going to be contacting with it, because they will lay you open. All right, I'm going to put these screws in the that outer shell for our muffler for just a second, and then we're going to put them right back on most likely. I want to show you how to determine whether we can use this muffler as a device to press our piece of rubber in there, or if we have to use a different fixture. All right, I'm going to set that right there. All right, now what we're looking for on the back of this muffler is a rolled flange. So you can kind of see this rolled flange sticking to the inside of the muffler shell. Some mufflers that sticks to the outside here. And if that's the case, you cannot use a muffler because it'll cut your pieces of rubber. So we can use our muffler there. Now it's imperative you remove the gasket here. And we're going to look at it. It looks like it's in good shape. You can't do a pressure test with the gasket on there because it will leak around it, because this is just a metal to metal seal, and it won't hold it. Won't hold it back. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and install our muffler shell back on there. I'm just going to put these up in here like so. Get this pointing in the right direction again. I'm just going to slide one in it to get it started. Now, one thing I like to do on all this stuff is back it up till I hear it click. There, hear it click. All right, so we're going to take these bumper spikes on off here. I went ahead and moved this over to our park tool stand that is, again, initially designed to hold up these string trimmers, but I really found it handy for times like this. I think, here we go, that it is, you can't mount it in the saw fixture. Between the two of those items, that is super handy. All right, so we probably need to clean back in there anyway. We'll lay those pieces right there. And there should be a torque screw right here. Oh yeah, let me move you over here a little. Got a torque screw right there. Get a little 10mm wrench to hold that with. Just spin this bumper spike off it. I just don't want to send one of those things through my knuckle. Going to put the bolt back in it and the nut so we don't lose it. Set it over here out of the way. Be in business. Perfect. Okay, now we'll go ahead and remount this back in the saw fixture. Sometimes it takes just an extra minute to do something like that. That will save you from healing up from an injury for quite a while. So we'll just count that as an investment in time. All right, now let's get back to this fella. All right, now, when I fed that piece down in there, there wasn't room for it to then still allow it to go up on those studs. So I'm going to have to loosen that a little bit more and just kind of notice that. Make sure we get it started where it belongs. Could have been because of the rubber, it could have been because I just didn't catch it. So we're going to push that thing back up on top of the studs. Maybe. Get a little bit more. Again, it's really tempting just to jerk that thing apart real quick. I know it is to just say, well, we know what's wrong with it. Let's just order a cylinder and a piston and throw it in there and forget about it. But if we don't do our homework and make sure that we know what's wrong first, then all that money and time, I mean, it's quite expensive to buy these parts. All that money and time is a waste, as you're gonna be doing it again. And if it's your own stuff, that's one thing. You like to waste your own time and money, but customers don't smile at that if it's a repeat thing. They understand a mistake every now and then. You know, we're all human, but when we're just trying to be quick and not be thorough, then that can wear thin. You can lose a customer pretty quick that way. So again, we want to. It might take a little longer to go through it, do it right the first time, but still, your money ahead to do it, and a good customer. That's what everybody's looking for. Everybody's looking for good customers. Nobody's really interested in troublesome customers either. Just like troublesome customers aren't looking for horrible technicians or repair shops. But what we're looking for is good customers, and we want to build that good customer. And if we do a good job for them, then they are going to tell their associates, all those that work with them, whether it's just a homeowner, they'll be telling people who they work with, hey, they did a good job for me. But I don't like how tight that screw is. I want to back it out and do it again, just to help it. I imagine it has a lot to do with that cylinder being so hot and damaged that but I don't want to break that thing off if I can help it. I'll probably order 2 more of those screws, because I don't want to put a screw like that I've been honestly kind of mean to here down inside of a new cylinder. So I'll probably order 2 more of those. I'm going to write that down right now on my little Stihl Engine Check sheet here. So we're going to write on here in our order, we want to order 2 muffler, 2 cylinder screws. All right, well, we have that taken care of. If you don't write it down when you think about it, if you're like me, later on you'll be like, oh man, ready to put this thing back together, and you don't have those 2 screws. And you've already told them, hey, we're going to put this all together for you today, so plan on stopping by on your way home from work and grabbing it, and you don't have the screws. And then you've put yourself in a tight spot, all because you relied on your old memory there that, again, if it's like mine, it doesn't always remember all the little details that I need it to do. So if I write it down, I don't have to worry about it. We've got our exhaust side sealed up, so now we're going to flip this guy over. So now we're going to come up here and see if we can't find something in this pile of goodness to seal up our intake side with. Now, I haven't done a Stihl engine check on an 880. I'm beginning to wonder if I have enough pieces to make that happen. So we're going to look through here and see what all kind of goodies we have to work with. I wonder if something like that would work. Nope, it won't. Down on the bottom. That's too tight. We may have to use this guy right here. See if we can make this guy seal off. It's not going to work either. We're going to have to use a carburetor to push against all that mess with. Then we'll inflate it through our pulse line. There, I think that'll work. We'll reinstall that piece. Let's turn him over the correct way. How's that sound? Oh, there's a little adapter piece, but that'll be fine. That'll push for us. All we have to do is just snug it down. We're good. Just gonna snug it. We don't want a horse on it there too much. That looks good. Now, let's see what our spec is on that. The specifications. All right, let's just get our tech manual out here for our 880. Printed these off so that I have to bring a computer out here. All right, so we are going to go to, let me show you our tech manual here. We're going to go to engine, and we're going to slide down here to crankcase, bearings crankcase, removing. Let's back up. Let's go to vacuum test, pressure test. So that's going to be on starting about 34 in here. All right. So we've got this sealed up. There is a special tool for that. I don't happen to have it, so that'll be a thing that we'll have to look into. So we'll take our spark plug and reinstall it. Put this guy in here. Snug that up. All right, so we're removing our decompression valve here. Get it out of there. You can kind of see that. Now, some guys remove those entirely and will buy these plugs and run them. Kind of get a little better performance out of the saw if you don't have a decompression valve leaking. I've never run one, but I know some folks do. Put that in there. I tell you, this stand is so nice for trying to do this job. That ought to be the #1 tool that comes with service repair stuff. All right, there we go. Now we're sealed here, we're sealed our plug, we're sealed on the exhaust, we're sealed up here on our intake side with our conglomeration of pieces. Now we're going to pressure test through this port. Now if we had the correct tool, we would just seal this guy off with a plug. And here's kind of what it, actually I'll show you a picture of what it does look like. Here is what the actual piece looks like right here. So it has a little nipple to put the rubber hose on, and then you use some long spacers, which they're in the drawer, and you just put your hose right on it and pressure test it. Now our spec for that is, let's see, are we doing a vacuum test first? Yep, okay, so we'll do a vacuum test. Is that what it says there? Okay, it's actually calling a pressure test first, so let's just look over here and just keep in, over here, pressure test, 0.5 bar. So we're looking, our spec for both is 0.5 bar. So we'll pressure test first, vacuum test second. All right, so we have our machine here set up, ready to go. We're going to pressure. All right, we're pressure testing. And it is holding. Now that should hold, I think, for 20 seconds. Yep, 20 seconds, what the thing says. So it looks really good. That'll work. Now let's go ahead, vacuum test. And it should, in the vacuum test, let me just go ahead and show you. So the spec for this indicates If the vacuum reading remains constant or rises no more than 3 bar in 20 seconds, it can be assumed that the oil seals are in good condition. And that will help us to make sure we get that right. Now, a seal, it's not just like on a diesel engine or something, or a 4-stroke style engine. If it's leaking a little bit around the front and rear main seals, so to speak, that it's no big deal, just drip some oil and go on. The problem is if this leaks, it's leaking air. And if we have an air leak in there, we'll be back to that lean condition again. Okay, 0.5 bar and start. Again, we're looking for no more than 3 or 0.3 bar in 20 seconds. I think it's still holding there really good, guys. All right, yeah, so we have drifted a fraction of 1 bar in 24 seconds. So we're going to call that good. Now, so we have pressure tested and vacuum tested our crankcase. Now let's go ahead and see what we've got here. So pressure tested crankcase, we had 0.5 bar. Okay, vacuum tested. Held 20 seconds. If values do not meet specifications, locate the leaks and note results. Now again, we have a little note here in Formix to reinstall the valve cover, but this is not a Formix machine, so of course it doesn't even have a valve cover. But again, places we would be looking for that, locate the leaks, were the seals on the sides, the impulse tube, and again, we tested impulse tube with this test. We would be testing the cylinder base gasket, that housing for any cracks, housing where the seams go, and anywhere else in the cylinder that we may have a problem. So that kind of, and again, we could have a leaking test fixture issue. So all of that is good, and we have no reason to believe that the bottom end of our cylinder is bad, or our crankcase rather is bad. So the next thing we want to do is crankshaft end play excessive and crankshaft side play excessive. Now that's something that is really, you just kind of reach in here and grab it. And I'm going to go ahead and pop that other side cover off, or the recoil housing rather, or pop it off of there so that you can look at that. And let's go ahead and spin this guy. I'm not going to put our pressure tester up because I want to show you a little trick there. To help us be able to see for certain if that thing's leaking. Now, if we're shaking on it, you know, that's one thing. But what I want to do is show you how to test it under pressure so that we can absolutely guarantee that we don't have a problem there, or a seal that might be failing, because if that thing's got play in it, we're still having that pressure in and out of that tank, or that housing rather, the crank. I'll spit it out in a minute here. We'll still have the pressure in and out and around the bottom of the crankcase, so we need to be able to test that pressure. Make sure it's not going to leak. Now, I've got a little crud built up right here in this fastener. I guess bar oil has dripped on it and left it. If I don't clean that out and I just go ahead and cram my screwdriver in there, it won't go deep enough, and then it could strip the top out of it, and then I'm really in a mess. So again, we'll take the time, clean that hole out real good, make sure we can get it in there. And again, these screws, all the same size, except for one long one, and it's where this part goes for our chain brake lever. All right, so we're just going to slide this chain brake. Make sure you can still see. We're just going to slide this chain brake up, pop this guy off. I like to lay them like that so they don't get scratched up. Now let's go ahead and retest this guy. I'm just going to put a little vacuum on it. Because that's what I'm really concerned about getting into there. All right, so let's put that there where we can see it. That looks good. Now I'm going to shake this guy all around. Make sure, do the other side too, up and down and all around, in and out, making sure that we don't have a leak anywhere. I think we're good and tight. We don't have any air trying to get out of there, and we can sometimes miss a little bit of feel, but that gauge will keep us honest on that. We won't be having a problem there that we're not seeing. So now we have another item we can check off of our list here on our Stihl Engine Check. So we're down here to crankshaft in play is okay. Okay. Pressure test the carburetor. And now this right here is all going to be on our carburetor.